Thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar discussion with Dean and Kathy. I'm Sawyer Conradi, Marketing Director at Icon Agility Services, here to make sure everything runs smoothly and to give our star experts the introductions they deserve. We had hundreds of registrants who asked hundreds of great questions, and those are what we'll be pulling from as questions for our expert panelists to go over in the time we have today. Please add any more of the questions to the Lean Coffee board. The link is in the chat, and vote for questions that are what you're trying to hear about. Our first panelist almost doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. I'm speaking, of course, of Dean Leffingwell, founder of Scaled Agile and creator of SAFE, which coincidentally happens to be the majority of the topics we're covering today. He's a very in-demand speaker, and it's absolutely wonderful that he made time for us today. Again, thank you, Dean, for being with us.
Thanks, Sawyer.
As for our next panelist, some say that once you receive direction from her, you'll never get lost again. That would, of course, be the one and only Kathy Marshak, one of Icon's first SPCTs and SAFE Fellows. We're proud to have Kathy, and we're proud of her accomplishments and incredibly grateful that she's made time for us today. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Sawyer.
A little bit about Icon. We've been doing this for about 30 years. I know it seems hard to believe, but we started with Scrum, extreme programming and business solutions in the 90s, through the creation of the Agile Manifesto in the early 2000s, and partnering with SAFE Scaled Agile in 2011. Most of our senior consultants were adopting and teaching Agile processes before Scaled Agile was even a thing. Now we teach, certify, coach, and augment Agile roles for 100% of the Agile world, whether it's a class, a workshop, a specialty, or at any level of an organization. We've worked with over 1,000 companies, about half of the Fortune 100, and we've trained over 25,000 people in SAFE and excel in the more advanced topics. That's more like lean portfolio management, executive leadership coaching, and coaching how coaches should coach. Also, this might not be an official accolade, but since we're the first partner of Scaled Agile, that de facto makes us Dean's favorite. I wish there was a badge for Dean's favorite. If you like what you hear today, follow us on LinkedIn and reach out, and we'll be happy to nerd out about anything Agile. Dean, how about you get us started?
Okay, thanks, Sawyer. I will make light of it all. Icon was our first partner, our first Scaled Agile partner. When we were a forming company about, it's been a decade or so ago now, Icon was proactive enough, and we knew people there who were doing the similar types of things that we said this would make a great partnership. And they actually influenced us to take a partner-driven model. So we don't do a lot of service delivery at all, just alpha and beta tests, and we depend on the Icons of the world to do the value delivery. So we're very appreciative. In a way, I think we do the easy part, right? We write a framework, we research, we study, we work in the field, but the real heavy lifting happens at the pointy end with customers. So we very much appreciate Icon. Worked with Kathy off and on for almost that full time. So it is kind of special, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. Got lots of opportunities to do webinars. My calendar gets full, but I'm just pleased to be a part of the Icon family. Let me talk a little bit about SAFE 6.0, and it's about flow. And what I'm going to describe here is the substrate that drove us here. So I'm not going to explain 6.0 in 20 minutes. That's hard. I'm going to explain the why. Let's start with a new BP. We don't change the BP very often, Kathy, because it freaks people out. That's a fact. If it were me, I'd update it every couple of weeks, but that just doesn't work. Then you end up in courses. People are teaching courses, they're looking online. It's not the same thing. So we've had to, frankly, slow down our pace of updating the big picture, but not slow down our pace of making incremental value delivery. So a lot of the flow stuff we're talking about now, and indeed some of the metric stuff, that's been released since 5.1. But occasionally we give it a new face. And when we do, it's a big deal. And if it's enough of a new face and enough of new value, then we do it as an upgrade. And that's what SAFE 6.0 is. You see a different color palette. It's a softer color palette for sure. And behind this are simple things like every single image has been re-rendered in the color palette. Now, I will tell you, I didn't think that was a big deal. In fact, I thought it was really annoying when we headed down that path. But then the articles started looking better and better. When you went to one article to another, you didn't find my color palette by somebody else's color palette. It really reads better. Every single article has been rewritten. We deployed our first AI tool. We use Grammarly as our text editor, and she is vicious. Passive sentences, double periods, single versus double quotation marks. My goodness, she'll drive you crazy. We also have a strong intent for localization. So as we updated our articles, we tried to do a little better to make it represent itself in a more simplified way so that it translated easier. Behind the scenes here, you see some things that are really a big deal that we just don't call out here. There is no program anymore. Program is just not a good word for a flow-based system. It creates the wrong connotation. Now, we've never treated programs as start and end things, as a collection of projects. We treat it as a generic thing, but the reality is a program is a known thing. It's a set of projects that work together as a start. Resources get assigned, people get assigned. It has an end. This is a continuous flow model. So we had to get rid of program just to be able to start talking about flow better. And that it reflects things like program increment, et cetera. Next slide. So as we categorize the collection of things that we've evolved during the course of the last 2 years, as I mentioned, we've done incremental delivery throughout. One of the challenges with incremental delivery from a marketing perspective is how do you make news out of the fact that every day something is different? So in general, you can't really do that. You can't be hounding people and say, put up a new article. So what we did here is a lot of work, and we collected that into 6 major themes. One is the foundation for business agility. The second is really empowering teams and clarifying responsibilities. Significant increase in responsibilities of even the product owner and the Scrum Master. They are not the same as they were before. Accelerating value flow is really what drove us here. That's going to be such a strong topic that we're going to cover that in depth, kind of in the second session. Enhancing business agility with SAFE across the business. We've got companies like Petrogas in Brazil, the national Brazilian oil company, that have used SAFE across their entire business. They did that with the help of partners for sure, but they didn't do it with our help. So we didn't really have, content around, okay, how do you roll this out in HR? How do you roll it out in marketing? They made do with what they had, but they basically transformed their whole business. That's a huge opportunity for increasing flow and value for every business, and we want to address that. Building the future with AI, big data, and cloud. Well, this was all ChatGPT became all the rage. Before that, we knew for a fact that software development is evolving and changing. Things like machine learning and continually modifying the models for machine learning become a big deal. And we thought these 3 kind of A, B, and C things make a good presence together. And then delivering better outcomes, mostly updating, measure, and grow, which has been around a little while, and including OKRs. So let's dive into these 6 and talk briefly about them. We did change the foundation. Many reasons. We needed to adjust the lean agile mindset. That's a big change. We eliminated the House of Lean. Not that the House of Lean isn't good. Everything in the House of Lean either got restated, moved, or got a promotion. In the case of a couple of things like respect for people, they got a promotion to core values. So the lean agile mindset evolved. The core values changed to be much pithier and very much more people oriented. The SAFE principles, one change, SAFE 6, I'll talk about that, principle 6. The roadmap, of course, changed because we have new offerings, and the SPC is now a SAFE practice consultant, and they have specific responsibilities with respect to flow. We moved CLC down there as well, because that makes sure it's part of every SAFE configuration. So a lot of kind of rototilling down there to rebuild the foundation, and business agility then gets stated at the top, including a representation of the business agility value stream. Next slide. And the reason for this is SAFE in flight. We need to describe to people what I do with SAFE. SAFE is passive. It sits there. You can read it, of course, but it doesn't run itself. It's people do all the work. So we realize there's kind of a canonical form, which is we're trying to bring new things to market. And we wanted to describe how to do that. And if you go to, for example, the Introducing SAFE deck, you'll see a real story about how you bring products to market more quickly. And that's the point. The point is not to be SAFE or lean or agile or XP or Scrum. The point is to deliver innovative solutions to market more quickly than ever before. And we have the competencies to do that. So kind of restating the why and the how. So if you read the business agility article, you'll see how the competencies, which I'm not expressing here or describing here, really drive that outcome much more quickly. Next. Here's the mindset. So agile values did not move. They've not changed. We've not changed them. I will tell you this. Kathy will tell you, they're easy to assume and damn hard to actually do. So as our company grows, we bring people on board, and being hired at Scaled Agile or being hired at Icon probably doesn't make you be an Icon or a Scaled Agilist. It makes you be a person who's now in that model. So we never underestimate the value on the right, but the value on the left is now converted to lean thinking. And it is so pithy and so simple, all the way back from Womack and Jones. Specify value by product. Okay, there you go, project or product. Identify the value stream for each product. How critical is that? Make value flow without interruptions. Let the customer pull value and pursue perfection. Now we kind of translate pursue perfection because we're not looking for perfection in the value stream. We're not manufacturing a widget the way this was described. We're looking for relentless improvement of the value stream, and that allows for innovation. It allows for lumpy things. It allows for experimental things. So relentless improvement is that. So that restates what we do is safe, and indeed becomes the new kind of overall meta model of what everybody does. Specify the value by product. Yeah, I know what your product is. Identify the value stream, and I could go on and on for this for quite a while, but this is the new lean thinking part of the lean agile mindset. Part of that, and this was a bit of the epiphany and a bit of the major restructuring, was to understand that when we went to lean thinking, that key principle number 3 in lean thinking, make value flow without interruptions, was a better label for what we had before as principle 6, which was about WIP and flow and queue size. It's still about WIP and flow and queue size. We're going to talk extensively about what make value flow without interruptions is, because if you do that one right, everything else is going to kind of fall into place. So I won't dwell on that further here, but that's going to be the topic of kind of the next 20 minutes. Empowering teams and clarifying responsibilities. You'll see here a realignment of the teams and the roles. You'll also see that every single role, if we hit the next slide, now has a responsibility wheel. The articles before were meaningful. I mean, they got us where we are, but as we read them, they were very much oriented towards, the kind of the to-do list, kind of the job task analysis. We wanted to abstract that up to make it simpler to think about each specific role. I see some thankful emojis going here. What does each role do? Well, a set of responsibilities, and the courses over time are migrating to this pedagogy. They're not all there today, but they will be. So these are the biggies, and you'll notice one here that didn't occur before. Assigned to the Scrum Master coaches improving flow. We don't think that Scrum is immune to flow. It has a different model, but it can flow. And we also think that Kanban is a first-class citizen of the system, and we've now established guidance for both Kanban and Scrum. Renaming the title was a really tough call. Not everybody runs Scrum. Not everybody then wants to attend a Scrum of Scrums if you're not a Scrum Master. People use Kanban as well. And in some companies, just the Scrum Master title just doesn't seem to meet their needs for how they want to think about people, and they don't like the term. So it's a Scrum Master team coach, but it's just one role. It's one set of responsibilities. Call it what you will. That's your business, but the responsibilities now include improving flow. Next. Each of the kind of the content roles have a key collaborations called out. So if I want to know what to do as a product manager, product management function, I have a responsibility wheel that includes like connect to the customer. Great. But it also tells me who I need to collaborate with. So as we organize around value and think about how to work, we certainly know that the product manager needs to talk to the RTE and the system architect, and they have a direct relationship with the business owners and a direct relationship with the product owners. So these little collaboration networks really make the system work. And when those work great, things go. And I know we've all experienced when those don't work great and they don't go well at all. So making the collaborations work right and the responsibilities work right is the answer to that. Much more clarity, a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of distilling. Articles went through 10, 12, 14 revisions, reviewed by, in some cases, as many as 100 SPCTs to figure out what these key collaborations are. Next. Accelerating value flow. We're going to talk about that in 4 areas. Go ahead and hit the next slide. And I'm going to leave that for now. But the critical thing here is that what drove me in particular to 6 was a better understanding of flow that was initiated by Kirsten's book, Project to Product. He's a friend of mine. I got to review an early version of his work, and I started to think differently about flow. And I started to think about the tools that were given for Kanban and Scrum, how they don't necessarily create a perfect answer to how you make flow happen in the system. Well, what the heck is flow? So we did some research and some analysis and a lot of brainstorming, some reviews with others. We decided that there's 8 fundamental properties of every flow-based system. When we did that, the insight hit us, which is that any 8 of these could mess up your flow. Now, some like work in process, you think, well, that's bad. No, it's not. If there's no work in process, there is no flow. There's always a queue. If it's a really long queue, you're going to be slow, but we want a queue, right? We want work to do. They're workers, people that do the real work, and there are bottlenecks. And what actually drove me to this particular representation was consulting with a small startup company where we discovered that the lack of one front-end developer was running the whole company about half speed, because everything went through that one bottleneck. And then I went right back to theory of constraints. I've seen this problem before. We never really articulated and say bottlenecks are a big deal. I expect Kathy's going to talk about bottlenecks as well. Next. A complete redo and rethink of built-in quality. I will tell you for a fact, there are places that I'm very proud of SAFe, and other places over time where we've done what we could do, but that was the state of the art. Our quality before was good stuff. It was mostly software related, but it wasn't really organized in a way that you could do it practically. In addition, as we get pushed and pulled beyond IT, certain quality practices like peer review and pairing, coding standards, and T-skills, those are not strictly software practices. Any marketing team that's producing marketing output without peer review is going to make big mistakes. Any marketing team where only one person can write, maybe update the marketing database is going to have an issue as well. And then on top of that, we build things. So we build software applications. So there's 2 sets of quality practice or software applications. And you see to the right all the way to the cyber physical system. So it gives you a modular way to think about quality. And why do we care so much about quality? Because you can't get flow without it. If you're failing on any of these, even T-skills, suffering from bottlenecks, too long a queue, you're not going to be in flow. And if you're producing errors that get downstream and cause recalls, you're still not going to be flow. So doubling down on quality. I noticed in the intro that Icon started back in XP. I still really like XP. We don't have it called out on big picture anymore, but it's built right in here. So virtually everything that XP taught us about, from continuous integration to pairing and peer review is built into the system on basic quality practices. Next slide, please. So more to come on this topic. Let me finish up the other few here. As I mentioned, people are bringing SAFe across the business. If IT is mostly agile or getting better and the rest of the organization isn't, if you have bottlenecks in legal, if you hit bottlenecks in marketing, you hit bottlenecks in sales, if you don't integrate with sales in such a way that they know how to provide incremental solutions to their customers without destroying their SLAs and all the other things that their customers depend on, you're only going to go so far. So what we're starting to see here is people pulling SAFe into the business and providing training strategies and implementations of agility throughout the enterprise. I mentioned Petrobras in Brazil. Many other companies have done that. In some ways, they're ahead of us. So I'll bet even Kathy can tell stories about how she's doing this in way outside of IT because the need is there. Is there some rule that says Agile is just an IT thing? No, Agile is about a business's ability to respond to change. So next slide, please. And we've spent a lot of time categorizing and distilling what we're finding. And we're describing now 5 patterns that we've witnessed, that we've coached, that we've implemented. And these are kind of different patterns. For example, an Agile business train, in response to COVID, one of our folks, Rebecca Davis, was at the CVS. They said, we don't have time to, stand up an art and figure out who's in the business going to do that and build all these interfaces. Let's put a couple hundred people together in a room right now and figure out how to deliver COVID vaccine faster. So within about 60 days of that, they were delivering COVID vaccines, and they weren't, we're an Agile release train and we're the business. You could not tell the difference. We were people delivering value. They were people delivering value. And it didn't matter if you were a developer or if you were a clinician or if you were somebody in charge of distribution, or somebody in charge of supply chain. It was all one effort. We're seeing that more and more. The others here I can't take time to go into, but these are other building blocks and modules that if you want your enterprise to grow in an agile and extended agile way, here's some tools for you. Each of these has guidance. Over time, in the next year or so, we will have more extended guidance on each. Specifically, we'll talk about how to build business-enabled arts and how to build combined portfolios and agile business functions as well. This is a really big deal. It's kind of the long pole in the tent. It's taken, a good decade. It took a decade to get agile out there. Took another decade to get scaled agile across IT. For the most part, we're probably at 30%, 40% adoption. It'll take another decade for the businesses to figure out how to really be agile. Once upon a time, I was preaching about how the world is going to be different, but that changed so fast. And the reality is the type of applications we build, many of which, not all, but many of which are going to be based upon AI. They're going to be based upon AI and machine learning. And we realized that a little bit of coaching on how you organize around AI, how you think about the new roles, the data scientists, the data engineering, the machine learning specialists, how they integrate into the art. Is that a shared service? Is it an enabling team? Is that embedded in every single team? Is it a centralized capability? Well, who knows? And by the way, AI almost exclusive, not entirely, but certainly like ChatGPT depends on big data. And the evolution and management of big data, I believe, is a portfolio concern. Now, we had not a lot, but we had some concern and pushback about why you put that at the portfolio level. Because most of the AI opportunities you have they're gonna exploit data from multiple value streams. So if you try to work solely at the value stream or art level, you'll create data silos that aren't normalized, extracted, and loaded in such a way that they can be used. So we just positioned it there to say, if you intend to do AI, you're going to have more attention to data than you've ever had before. We need to treat it in a more agile manner. We need the right specialists. It can no longer be just the reporting function in the back office of a small shop. And it's all moved to the cloud, right? That gig is up. Nobody's going to try to do a data center-based, really large machine learning, AI-based application without being in the cloud. So they work together, and you need them all. Kind of already mentioned that. So AI is revolutionizing everything. Nobody knows where this goes. People say, Dean, what happens with AI in the future? I have no idea. For 50 years now, I've been hearing about AI, but I tell you, at this time, it feels really, really different. And we now know that AI can create code that nobody can maintain or read. So that's pretty interesting. I can spin up a website that I can't possibly use, but okay, that's a step. Let's go to the next slide. And kind of lastly, we've elevated OKRs to a first-class citizen. Here's the world we've been operating in. Executives like paradigms to manage their business with, and they like to align strategy and execution. And I agree with that. And they picked OKRs because of John Doerr's book and because it's really a simple thing, right? If you do OKRs right as a strategy, and even if they cascade more than you wish they might, you will have been forced to say what your objectives are and what you expect out of that. So you can't have if you do OKRs, you by definition have documented a strategy in OKR format. Well, the problem we have is we don't want OKRs on one side and PI objectives on the other, and safe strategic themes and operate in this parallel universe where the executives speak one language and we speak another. So we needed to harmonize that. We needed to give place for people who use OKRs to use safe successfully. And the next slide, I'll tell you where we did that. Now, you can use OKRs for anything, right? I mean, one of the talks I saw at the summit was one of our fellows talking about using an OKR personally to manage his health and weight. Well, that can happen. That's not our point here. Our point here is that at certain places like strategic themes, the purpose of an art, the results you expect to get out of the epic, and also how you're transforming the OKRs, how you're transforming the organization with OKRs is a key element. So we just described some super helpful use cases that marry. If executive team is using OKRs to manage strategy, we marry that with SAFE so that they're now comfortable that their OKRs are still okay language to use. We can use those OKRs, at any level, including, what we expect out of the art. And as I mentioned before, SAFe 6 is about flow, 6.0. And I was driven to this because, to be honest with this group, I've been on the framework team is an agile team, less than 10 people, streamlined team for 6 or 8 years now. Most of us work together. We don't work in any way that we actually published. We're a high-performing team. We use Scrum, we use Kanban. The organization runs in 2-week iterations. We don't. We run in 1 week, a subharmonic multiple. So what happens is that people figure out how to really make their system work. They don't just say, we run pure Scrum, we run pure Kanban. They tend to hybridize. And I think that hybridizing is important. And I think when we give people permission to hybridize without destroying the API to the art, I think that teams will be more empowered to do things differently. So flow is what drove us here. Getting rid of things like the word program, which just didn't imply flow, softening the iteration boundary. An iteration is a cool thing, but does it have to be the point at which we deliver a demo? No, couldn't I do it Tuesday? So that brings us to the next part, which is what the heck is going on in flow in the real world, Kathy?
Thanks so much, Dean. And so now we're going to take a deeper dive. I'm going to talk about these 8 flow accelerators. And I'm going to talk to you about how we've applied them in real life situations. So part of SAFe principle number 6, make value flow without interruptions, identifies not only those 8 properties of flow that Dean mentioned earlier, but also these 8 flow accelerators. And think of these accelerators as some ideas, some concrete actions that you can take at any level of the framework to improve your flow. I really like this. These accelerators give you a way to really focus your conversations about how to make things better. I'm not going to talk about all 8 because we don't have time today. I'm going to highlight 5 of these. And if you have more questions, if you want to talk about the other flow accelerators, feel free to post a question to our Lean Coffee board. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to start with accelerator number 1, no surprise, visualize and limit WIP. As Taiichi Ohno says, the aim of Kanban is to make troubles come to the surface. I love this because it is absolutely true. Once you start to lay out the work in a way that you can visualize it, you can readily see where the holdup is. In this example, this ready to test state is clearly indicating that we've got an issue with how much work our testers can do. So this allows us to see the problem. And this idea of seeing the problem and then being able to address it is really important. I work at different levels with my customers. And so I want to tell you 2 different instances where this idea of visualizing your work and limiting work in process has really paid off. In a lot of my portfolio clients, one of the first things we do is take all of the work from all of the various systems and intake funnels and so forth and lay out the work so we can see it all on a big physical wall or virtual wall. And time again, when we've done that, I hear quotes like this from portfolio leaders. I had no idea we were working on so many things, and I question why we're doing a whole bunch of these. And so just the process of bringing this to everybody's way of seeing gives you that opportunity to question, what should we pause so we can focus on the most important things and stop starting and start finishing. At a team level, I often find that teams, even those that have been using Scrum for a long time, are not applying this concept of WIP limits. And so just a couple of weeks ago, I was coaching a team and I asked them, well, tell me a little bit about your WIP limits. I'm not seeing those. And so after we had a conversation about what WIP limits are, way to minimize, put a constraint on the number of items that you have in process in a certain state at any moment in time, the product owner was like, well, we'll give it a shot. And so that team went back as part of their retrospective. They talked about whether they should apply WIP limits. They crafted their first set of WIP limits, and they worked through, and they saw that once they put those WIP limits in place, they started completing stories faster. Now that team is experimenting with lowering their WIP limits even more. And that's exactly what we want with this accelerator. We want people to understand it. We want them to apply it. We want them to experiment so that they own a way to improve flow within their own team. So accelerator number 1 is where we help a lot of people get started. Then we come to accelerator number 2, address the bottlenecks. So now when you can see where work is stacking up, it's much easier to say, let's go address this. A bottleneck really exists when you have higher load or more work than you have the capacity to do. A train, a team, a portfolio, a solution train, all of these groups can only run as fast as the bottleneck allows. And so this brings us to Eli Goldratt's theory of constraints and the 5 focusing steps. Goldratt says if we want to really address the bottleneck, we need to do these things. We need to identify the system's constraint. We need to decide how to exploit it. We need to subordinate everything else to the constraint. So slow everything down so we can move at a pace that is smooth where that constraint exists. And then we want to elevate the constraint. So raise the number of items that can flow through it. And then we've resolved that constraint. So now let's move to the next one. And that's this idea of using the 5 focusing steps. I want to talk about how this looks in action. All of my customers over the past 10 years of helping them apply SAFe have ended up with some type of capacity constraint. They don't have enough user experience people. They don't have enough full stack engineers. They don't have enough people who understand the cloud. They don't have enough data scientists. So this is a recurring pattern that we see over and over again. So at one of my last clients, their constraint to really moving good work through the system was that they had insufficient user experience capacity. So we identified that constraint. Step number 2, we needed to decide how to exploit that. We only had so much expertise and time. So what did we decide to do? We allocated 70% of their capacity to work on the most valuable products. Then the other 30% we used to enable others to grow those UX skills that we really needed. Number 3, we had to subordinate everything else to the constraints. We had to slow things down. How did we do it? We were ruthless in prioritizing UX intensive features. So we slimmed down that list and we increased the work that was being done on APIs and other areas of the solution where we didn't need that UX expertise. That kept us moving at a good pace while continuing to keep our UX people working in flow rather than in a stressful situation where they were spending a lot of time context switching because they had too much work to do. Step number 4, how did we elevate the system's constraint? We were able to hire a couple of experts, and one of those experts helped us surge, enabling other people. So this is how we increased the amount of work that could go through that bottleneck. And once we had done that, we smoothed out our flow, we were able to repeat the process to address the next constraint in that system. And that's an example of addressing the bottlenecks in action. There are other ways we could have addressed that, but this is our story. I hope that you have some success stories like that yourself. Now, accelerator number 3 is all about minimizing handoffs and dependencies. What you're seeing here in the middle of the board is an ART planning board. In past versions of SAFe, we referred to this as the program board, but now it's our ART planning board. We create this during PI planning, and then we keep it up to date throughout the PI. It helps us understand when features will be done, those are the blue cards, and dependencies, those are the red cards and the related strings. So I'll tell you a story. A couple of years ago, I was at a PI planning event, pardon me, and I was standing near the program board and I heard a couple guys behind me talking. And they were talking about how painful it is to update this board. And they were complaining about it and what they didn't like and so forth. And so I turned around and I said, hey, you know what? Updating this board is painful on purpose. It reveals the pain of dependencies, and that pain should motivate us to eliminate the dependencies, because that is absolutely our goal. Let's minimize or eliminate those dependencies. Well, how can we do that? We can ask ourselves a few questions. Are our arts and teams well structured? Maybe we've got skill gaps. Maybe we misunderstood our development value stream when we got started. Maybe we need to grow some skills. Maybe one of the reasons we have dependencies is because we haven't decentralized decision-making enough and everybody's waiting for approvals from another group. So the accelerator to minimize handoffs and dependencies has a lot of very concrete steps that you can take, whether you're working at a team level, at an art level, at a solution train level, or at the portfolio level. Accelerator number 7 is to optimize time in the zone. And this is an idea that I really appreciate that it exists here within SAFe principle number 6, because we haven't really been talking about this very much within the Scaled Agile community. Something that you hear about in communities of practice and in retrospectives. I don't have enough time to really focus and get good, solid thinking work done. That's what this accelerator is all about.
Hey,
We want to
Kathy,
make, yes.
could interrupt with our own story. So
Sure.
all businesses that strive for perfection tend to suffer from too much to do, right? There's always more to do than you can do it. We certainly do. So the company established kind of a policy of every other week, no meeting Fridays, as an experiment. It was really interesting because we took that time, our team, and said, that's our meeting Friday. Because what happens then is that since nothing else is appearing on our calendar, we're all online basically during core hours. We're across lots of many time zones. So our time and zone is actually working independently, working together as a team. We start to figure out what we're going to do. We work through the day. We sync 3 or 4 times. So we've optimized our time in the zone by meeting more.
That's excellent. Thank you, Dean. And I think that's an important thing to highlight. A lot of times people think time in the zone means me on my own with my headset on and nobody talking to me. That's not always the case. It can be done in a team setting. It can be done in a pair. And so really optimizing time in the zone is being a little bit ruthless in how you are spending your time, how you're working, how focused the topic of the agenda, if it is in a meeting, how effective you are at making decisions, and so forth. And so really experiment a little bit to try to maximize your time in the zone, because it does improve flow. And finally, we have accelerator number 8, remediate legacy policies and practices. We all know that when we go through an agile transformation and we're really trying to challenge the existing ways of working, sometimes we run against a bunch of barriers, right? We're dealing with people who are used to having super detailed business cases, or maybe we have policies in place that we have to freeze our code and it has to sit on the shelf for 2 weeks before it can be moved to production. All kinds of things like that related to timesheets and how we handle CapEx and OpEx and so forth. So I want to just tell you an example of how I have helped my clients remediate some legacy policies and practices related to audits. And kind of the steps that I go through to get buy-in for changes are shown here. So at one of my clients, actually many of my clients, we have to address, how we prepare for audits, what auditors are looking for, what evidence needs to be provided in order to prove compliance with various regulations. And so how do we do this? I have found if we start by having a conversation with the auditors and the stakeholders to understand the intent of their existing policies and really listen, right? Not go in with, I know how to solve this, but really listen and then prove to them by the questions you ask, by the way you re-summarize what you heard, that you truly understand what they feel they need to do and why. Once you've done that, you start to build trust with these people. Then you can explore with the stakeholders how you can meet those needs in another way while yielding those benefits. If you really engage these people in the conversation, you are not only increasing engagement, but you are increasing ownership. So as one of my colleagues likes to say, authorship increases ownership for the change. So we need to engage them. Even if as a seasoned consultant, you've done this at 10 other companies, it doesn't matter. Really engage with these people. Work through their concerns and demonstrate how the new approach would work, right? Prototype, well, here's what this would look like. Here's what we would give to the auditors. Here's the evidence. In multiple situations when we were dealing with auditors, they had questions and concerns about, well, how will I as an auditor provide evidence, or how will our external auditors see this information? Great, let's prototype. Let's build a couple of dashboards. Here are the queries that you need to use, and boom, one-stop shopping to get the information that you need to facilitate an audit. So really work through, and then once you've got a game plan in place, communicate really widely about the change, how it was arrived at, who was involved, what you worked through, what the new expectations are, and how the transition to a new set of policies and practices will be applied. I can't stress this enough, remediating legacy policies and practices can save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. And that is true, again, at every level of the framework. So I encourage you to read not only SAFE principle number 6, make value flow without interruptions, but to visit these 4 flow articles on the website that provide you a lot of concrete ideas and tips to apply. I didn't talk about the flow metrics, but I encourage you to read about those as well in the Measure and Grow article. And with that, let's see what's brewing on our lean coffee board.
Hey, Kathy, I was watching the questions come in. The one that came about, you just mentioned, they want to know how to measure art flow. That's actually pretty well defined, right? If you read the art flow article, you will see specifically how the measures that we've established for flow apply to the art. So you'll use your art Kanban to set up the same things for flow time, flow load, flow velocity, and the same measures that you would have for the others. But the things that are going through the art are features. So you're measuring feature flow. So I think we answer that question by saying, here's a good article and a good set of guidance for exactly that.
Awesome. And so I'm just going to, I can see you guys have been voting and putting your comments up here. So this is excellent. So I am going to just drag our first question over here. And Dean, why don't you get started? The question is, what's the difference between an agile business train and a business-enabled art? And this question is from Beth.
Right. Okay, that's a really good question, and it's one that's spurred a lot of debate. Let's start with the fact that not all arts should be, quote, business-enabled, right? We've got platform arts. They're not stupid about the business, but we fundamentally don't need business function in our platforms art. We don't generally need legal. We don't have salespeople involved. We don't have marketing strategies associated with platform art. Not every art needs to be business enabled. In addition, a lot of arts that should be aren't. So a business enabled art is guidance that says, wow, if you really want to be streamlined, you're going to need some representatives with business, or you're going to need to be able to load those folks onto your train, either as a shared service or permanently. A business train basically says, okay, forget all of that. We are one fat art, and we're operational value stream and an agile release train, and we work together, and we deliver together. So a business enabled art is one kind of art. A business enabled train includes the operational value stream. And I just think it's an overstatement to say that every art should be business enabled. It sounds great. It's like generic. Well, we don't want our arts to, you want them not to know about the business. No, you got to understand the cognitive load, what's relevant to them. What's relevant to them is know their users of the platform, and they know that they're providing good service. They don't really need to know how the streamlined arts actually deliver value to the end user.
Thank you, Dean. I think you did an excellent job. I'm going to call this one done. Next up, we've got a question from Mark. Did you consider changing the enabler types to the flow distribution types? Dean, that's definitely a framework question for you.
Yeah, and the answer is the flow distribution types can be any type of distribution. That distribution could be state, it could be type of work, et cetera. So you could easily have enablers as a type, and you would monitor in your flow distribution or flow load that you had enablers that occurred as a part of the overall, but they're unlike things, right? I can't see the question anymore, but
about that. I don't know what's happening here with our little lean coffee board. It's having a moment.
It's goodness. In any case, flow distribution is the distribution of whatever type of thing you want to measure. It can absolutely be enablers, but enablers by definition are not identically equal to a type of flow element that appears in flow distribution.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to not use this anymore because it's causing problems. Okay. But here's our next question. I'll keep my mouse over the question. Why has team coach been called out in association with the Scrum Master, and art coach is not called out in association with the RTE?
Kathy, this is not the first country fair for some of these people. Okay. I always think it's a little bit demeaning to say that's a great question, but really that is a great question. And here was the thinking behind that. We started with the team, and we needed to basically break out of the fact that we picked the Scrum Master as the label for that person that coached the team in Scrum. And we have Scrum Masters in our company and all over the world now that have nothing to do with Scrum. They have the title of Scrum Master, but they coach Kanban or whatever. So we needed to address that. So we decided to kind of co-brand it. Now, there's other questions in there about what's the difference between an agile coach and a team coach. I have no idea. Okay, the market picks its own definitions, its own interpretations, and no two are the same. What I can say is that our label, which is Scrum Master Team Coach, is one role with one specific set of responsibilities. You can call it whatever you like. Would Agile Coach be better? I don't know. I'll bet that the whole Agile coaching community would think that wasn't a good answer. All these terms are overloaded. They're all methodologically overloaded. Some become ideologically overloaded. So we're trying to stay back from that and saying, we agree on this set of responsibilities. What do you call it? We pick that title to start co-branding and say, well, not everybody is Scrum. And if let's just say we have a large shop and they're really good with Kanban or XP, they're going to not adopt SAFe because they have to get Scrum Masters. Well, darn, that's a real miss. So that's why we made this label. It's a hybrid label. It's one role, one set of responsibilities. Call it whatever you like in your enterprise, because it's very difficult for us to go in and start programming HR systems and RASIs to say that this person is this role. And lots of challenge in the industry about that. Some like to hard code Scrum Master as a thing and have degrees of Scrum Masters. Well, you've hard coded Scrum. Others like to say, no, we call them Agile coaches or I'm not sure other labels. And we've codified those with various degrees. That's really your business. We can't take a position that says in your company, it should be called this. We do take a position that the high-performing teams have coaches. And therefore, the label that we've associated with this is the Scrum Master and the team coach. It gets us out of the kind of pure Scrum box, which is not a terrible box. I mean, we run elements of Scrum. Scrum is incredibly populated, as some 500,000 Scrum Masters out there that do really good work. We want them on board with us. We also want them now to take the next step in their career skills and start thinking about not just the coaching elements, but how to achieve additional flow. Somebody
Excellent.
needs to know how flow works.
And so, Dean, what about changing the name from a release train engineer to an art coach? As a framework team, did you guys discuss that
We
to kind
did.
of elevate this idea of coaching all the way up?
We did. And we came to the conclusion that right now there was too much brand equity, certification authority, and courseware associated with this really odd label we called RTE. So we simply made a commercial decision that said the release train engineer is a known thing. It's awkward in places like in India, it has the engineer is strictly associated with engineering. It doesn't have the train connotation. Not a perfect role. It's kind of like product owner. Did they really own the product? No. We just decided that the brand equity was too deep, that the pride of ownership was too deep to say that that's a role we're going to change. Would that change over time? I have no idea. Is it truly the art coach? It is truly the art coach.
Wonderful. And so I'm looking at our time here. Sawyer, do we have time for one more or do we need to wrap?
I think we have time for one more.
Okay, great. So our next question up says, could we cover the topic of integrating waterfall cost centers with the Agile team's work? Learning and development section seems to work in waterfall while the team works in the Agile format.
It's kind of a compound question. We know how to interoperate with Waterfall and Agile. We do it all the time. We also know that they're largely incompatible models, right? If a Waterfall is a cost center with a group of iSkills like software developers and testers, they're going to be working on utilization, not flow, because that's all they can do. They're associated with multiple projects. How that works with the individual teams, if you go back to, if you look at lean budgeting and you look at the challenge of integrating those cost centers and shared services as opposed to line orientation, you'll see that indeed the nature is such that you have to bias towards the Agile team. And in general, we're trying to eliminate the waterfall cost centers. And I think as we go to Agile in general, imagine Agile in the enterprise, we want a common way of working, a new way of working. We want that way of working to be Agile. Can we integrate with waterfall cost centers? We do all the time, but it creates friction and overhead. It creates different types of, job cost accounting. It often creates timesheets as well as your Agile project management tooling. So we're basically in this transition zone where we're trying to kind of get away from that. I'm going to cover normalizing points really quickly here if I can. Normalizing points is just a starting point, right? The challenge we have with no form of discussion about what a point means is you can't get an art started. You get teams together and say, what are you going to do in this period? In addition, when you get to the question of, okay, we run this velocity, but we have 2 people on vacation and 1 people in a meeting and 2 people teaching, you end up having to back out days anyway. So the reality is, I think this whole thing is incredibly overblown, and we're just trying to say, can this team estimate its work? How many stories they get through the system? How many features they get through the system? And can they make adjustments? And when you start with brand new Agile teams, it's just easy to say, let's start here. But the next day, the next month, you can forget it. And I think what we could readily get away from is any heat and smoke around this topic, because it's a methodological point of a pin. And it doesn't matter once you're in flow.
Absolutely. So I want to say thank you very much. I'm going to hand this back to Sawyer to wrap us up. So everybody will have a minute between what they're doing here and whatever you've got next in your day or evening. Sawyer, thank you.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Kathy, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today and throwing in your questions. It was a great conversation. Obviously, we could do this for another 8 hours straight. But we appreciate you staying tuned until the end. And if you have any more questions on the SAFe 6.0 updates, or maybe questions that we weren't able to get to in time, we'll set up a time with one of our experts to go through those with you. Connect with us on LinkedIn and join our email updates to get the latest on business agility and scaled agile like this. Again, thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Kathy. Thanks, Sawyer, for having us.
Thank you, Dean. Bye, Sawyer.